The Marching Roundtable is proud to be an official media partner of Drum Corps International.
Thanks for coming to the Marching Roundtable YouTube channel, sharing great information to help you succeed in all the marching arts. While you're here, we hope you'll subscribe. Hi, this is Tim Hinton, the Beast of the Marching Arts and the host of the Marching Roundtable podcast. On this series, we talk with a private lesson teacher and performer for each instrument to tell you what you need to know to be more effective in working with those students. We hope you enjoy the series.
Euphonium players can do more than you think they can. But if you want to hear what a euphonium can do, listen to a brass band, listen to some soloists, and hear how euphonium can really, run circles around some of these parts that they're given in wind ensemble or orchestra parts. So I think it's important that euphonium players can listen to other euphonium players' soloistic playing and hear what we're capable of, because a lot of the times in some of the band music, they're given half notes and whole notes to be an octave higher than tubas, but they can really handle some great stuff, as seen in some of these trio sections and marches and some great literature out there. So don't limit them to those half notes and whole notes, and give them an opportunity to shine. So we want to make sure that these kids with these bigger instruments are not moving their body to the instrument. So what we want to do is essentially put it on the inside of that left leg, and the taller students are going to have to sit up. So the kids are not going to like this. When you tell them this, they will not be happy. A lot of kids, especially high schooler guys, will have to lift the euphonium up off their lap. I like the tone of a euphonium. I like how I can fill, I say that I fill the room with a hug. Because I think tuba and euphonium, because our bells go up, it kind of, our sound goes up and then just descends on everyone into this like pool of low brass sound. And I love how that feels.
This podcast is sponsored by FJM, Fred J. Miller Incorporated, found at fjminc.com. Hey everybody, this is Tim Hinton, the Beast of the Marching Arts. Welcome to Marching Roundtable. I'm talking about euphonium today with Amy Bliss. Amy, how are you?
I'm great. I'm so excited to talk about euphonium with you today.
Thank you. So when I was a band director, like a lot of my very best students were euphonium players. And I don't know if that's like a just experience I had, but I have a fondness in my heart for euphoniums.
Yay, that makes me so happy. I don't know. Maybe they're just, you just had some great students choose euphonium. Who knows?
Could well be, but I also have a fondness for trombone player kids, and that's not necessarily always common. So who knows? But anyway, tell us about yourself, Amy.
Yeah. So I went to Capital University in Columbus, Ohio, where I majored in euphonium performance and music education. And I did some additional trombone work as well when I was at Capital. And then I made the big leap across the pond. I went to the Royal Northern College of Music in Manchester, England, where I studied with Stephen Mead and Dave Thornton. And that's kind of where I got a little bit more into brass band. Believe it or not, I did not play in a brass band until I went to England, which is the home of the brass bands. So after I got my master's in euphonium performance, I got additional work. While I was there, I did kind of what you would call an American minor in music journalism, because I like to write, music research, because it's just a good skill to have, and music education in the community. So basically, I did more work in how to promote community involvement outside of the school environment. And then I moved back to the US, where I started teaching euphonium at Rowan University in New Jersey. And I got my doctorate in euphonium performance at Rutgers University, where once again, I brought music education in and did some more work in music education while I was getting the DMA in euphonium performance. So that's kind of a little snapshot about me and my education. We moved back to Ohio from New Jersey in 2020. Great time to move, by the way, March of 2020. Fantastic time. That was an adventure, but we survived and we're here back in the Columbus area. And I have a studio of euphonium, baritone, trombone, tuba, basically just low brass students and music theory students, both in person and online. During the pandemic, I discovered that if you move things online, you can teach anywhere. So sometimes I teach students from who knows, the middle of nowhere where they just don't have a euphonium specialist, that they have access to, and they want to work with a specialist, sometimes in addition to their local band director teaching them lessons, or a low brass generalist, or sometimes I teach beginner piano, especially to kids who have some special needs, because especially students who are autistic, leaving their home environment can be very stressful. So when we move things online, I can teach from my home environment to their home environment, and they can use whatever tools that they need to be in an environment where they're comfortable learning. So it's been an adventure moving back to Ohio and reestablishing myself outside of the college sphere. But I really enjoy teaching low brass and music theory and beginner piano online and in person.
That's wonderful. And you also have a podcast out there. Tell us about that briefly, if you would.
Yeah, when we were talking before we started recording, I showed him what I joke to be my NPR mic, my huge Blue Yeti here. Yes, we have a podcast about brass band, and it's from the North American perspective, because a lot of brass band stuff comes out of the UK. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to bring brass band to North Americans. And even though we have people from around the world on our podcast, we're coming at it from the perspective of North Americans. And so the podcast is called New World Brasscast. It's available pretty much everywhere except for Apple Podcasts for some reason. I have no clue. There's some sort of glitch, so we have to actually talk to those people and get it on there. But we're available pretty much everywhere else. So I think that a lot of brass players, especially those who enjoy marching band and maybe are no longer in high school, or they like doing drum corps and they've aged out, moving over to brass band is a very natural progression. Brass bands typically promote the same team building and that same cooperation and really driving towards perfection in performance. And we have competitions as well. So we tend to get a lot of drum corps, marching band enthusiasts over into the brass band world. So I figured I'd mention that podcast so that you and I can kind of cross-pollinate our podcasts.
Absolutely. I think that's wonderful. So our premise today is that there is a band director and instructor standing in front of an ensemble, and it could be a brass band, and there are euphonium players sitting there. What would you, Amy, as a euphonium specialist, what would you want that person to know that would help them do a better job teaching those students? Where would you want to start the conversation?
Right. That's a fun thing to jump in on. I actually do a few graduate level brass methods courses where I go in as the euphonium person and talk to band directors about this exact thing. So I actually reviewed my handouts before we came on to see what I last said. I think one of the biggest things, because I asked to prepare for my talks with these brass methods courses, I talked to a ton of euphonium players and I said, what do you want me to tell band directors? I mean, I have this opportunity several times a year to talk to band directors about what, they should know about euphonium. So what I'm telling you today is actually coming from euphonium players that I've kind of compiled their opinions and things that they feel are important. And the biggest thing that is mentioned over and over and over again is we need to get the naming of baritones and euphoniums correct. We need to clear this up once and for all about which instrument is which instrument. And so largely we have three flavors of baritone / euphonium-esque instruments that we kind of come across in common, American wind band situations.
And that was actually going to be the first thing I was going to ask you too, Amy. I think it's just very common. Is it a euphonium? Is it a baritone? Is it something else? I mean, it seems to be very important to euphonium players that we name this correctly, and I understand that. So I'm really glad that you're starting there. So explain it up. That's great.
Okay, so we can divide these instruments into baritone and euphonium. Okay, so how do we distinguish between them? Well, a baritone is what we call a cylindrical instrument. So it's more of a tube all the way through until it gets to the bell and it goes whoop out towards the bell. Okay, so a baritone is going to be the same distance most of the way through. And I have an example of a baritone, so I'm going to pull that out. If you're listening to the podcast, I would encourage you to I'm going to listen to the description that I have. But this is a baritone. I want you to notice the bell is actually, not all that big. It just goes to my mid forearm. And one of the biggest giveaways here is that the wrap of the baritone, the tubing that goes around that we hold onto, is usually down by the valves. Okay. This is an instrument that's probably, I don't know, like 6 pounds. And this is a baritone. Another giveaway is the tuning slide. This is my son's baritone, so hopefully, there we go. I took it out. The tuning slide, I can actually flip it and put it back in the other way. Voila, it stays because this is a cylindrical instrument. So most of the instrument is going to be the same. Got to put it back so he doesn't get upset with me. This is mostly the same all the way through until we get to the bell, and then it gets bigger. So this is going to sound a lot more like a valve trombone. This is going to have a very bright, punchy sound. And so that is one of the main instruments that I want to point out to you today. I'm going to grab my euphonium and bring that up. And it usually, after you kind of have acclimatized to seeing the baritone, now you're going to see the euphonium, and it's going to look huge compared to that. So here comes the euphonium. And here is my euphonium. Okay? So you can immediately see that it's much bigger, right? The tubing goes up above the valve section, and I actually have to have a bar to hold on to back here because the tubing is going so far above the valve section because we need more space. The euphonium is bigger because it's gradually getting bigger because it's a conical instrument. I can't take the tuning slide out of this one because I have all my gadgets and everything, but you can look, if you just look at it, the one side visually you can see that it's bigger than the other side. Because again, this is a conical instrument, so it's shaped like a cone. It's getting bigger as it goes through. So some of them will have 4 valves. Mine does. Some of them won't. That's a common misconception about euphonium and baritone, that one of the differences is that a baritone is going to have 3 valves and euphonium is going to have 4 valves. Nope. There are 4 valve euphoniums, there are 4 valve baritones, there are 3 valve euphoniums, 3 valve baritones. Doesn't matter one bit. It just determines kind of how advanced it is. So anyway, this instrument is about 11.5 pounds. So it's significantly bigger and heavier. So those are the 2 main instruments that we have. Now, I don't have the third that kind of fits into this category, but that is what we would call an American baritone. So this is where things get a little bit hazy, right? An American baritone is halfway between these 2 instruments. And so it usually is the one that goes loop-de-looped around, and then usually the bell goes forward. And frequently the valves are in the front. So that's what we call, usually euphonium players will call an American baritone, because first off, it doesn't exist anywhere else. No one else is playing these. These are usually American made instruments, and they're usually pretty old. And they don't have a professional level model. They're only student models. Um, so that is very frequently called a baritone. We call it kind of an American baritone because it's not technically, it's a euphonium because it is conical. If you take the tuning slide out, flip it, and put it back in, it's going to fall out. So technically, it's a euphonium, but we don't. It's kind of like an enigma. So that's why I don't have one, because I don't want to. but, but those are the three that we see commonly. So I hope that you can that any band directors who are watching this or listening can understand kind of the difference between a baritone and euphonium, so that we're using correct terminology. We have, I think we have a place where we have the place where the terminology in our country went south, kind of nailed down to probably when when all of these German immigrants came over from Germany and mostly settled in the Midwest, where those American baritones were made. And do you know, Tim? Do you know the German word for euphonium?
I do not. I'd love to hear it.
Baritone.
Ah,
So we have all of these German immigrants coming over and working in these factories making instruments, and they're calling them baritones.
interesting. So that explains a little bit about the confusion.
Absolutely.
And I would assume then, if one has the conical and the other just is cylindrical, then you mentioned that the baritone tends to be brighter, euphonium a little bit darker. So that would make a difference perhaps in what you used when, I suppose.
Yeah, and baritone is not used as much as we think. When we see so many things mislabeled baritone, but baritone is really not used very frequently. It's used in the British brass band. It's in some Granger stuff, some Holst stuff, but by and large, about three-quarters of the stuff that's written for euphonium and wind band is mislabeled when it says baritone. It's just due to that naming error that I mentioned.
Right, and then it could be that we think we have a euphonium. It's actually an American baritone, but it's really like a different kind of euphonium, and it has that different kind of name. So that can see where that would. But a lot of schools perhaps have these older instruments are still around. It's an American baritone. It's not a true baritone.
Yes, and I think we have the same problem that, I don't know if it's a problem. We have the same issue, should we say, that tubas have. We have so many different configurations. It's a relatively new instrument invented, we're approaching 200 years ago, which is pretty new in terms of instrument inventions, you know. And so something that was invented by different people. You know, we don't have just one euphonium inventor. We have probably three good candidates for who invented the euphonium. And then they just kind of morphed into the euphonium that we see today. So we don't even have a single inventor. Tubas get a day because a patent was filed. But we had several people who realized that we needed an instrument to fill a certain need, and they all invented it at roughly the same time. And so they just kind of all exist in different setups.
Right, and thank goodness they did, because I love that sound of the euphonium and how it fits into the ensemble, and sort of one up from tuba, shall we say, or whatever. And I think it's also so melodic, and so it has that wonderful ability to play those melodic lines down in that lower octave, and that adds so much to an ensemble. So not to sit here and wax poetic about euphonium, but I think that it's a wonderful addition to an ensemble. I'm glad that all of these people decided it was needed and worked on that. Very good. Okay, so I'm standing in front of the ensemble. I've now got them correctly labeled or named.
Yay.
What would be the next thing that you would want me to know?
I would like you to know that euphonium players can do more than you think they can. I say this because we have the composers have written so many times the euphoniums in octaves with the tubas or playing the same part as the trombones. I think it was Gail Robertson who did some research, and she traced these orchestration books that teach composers how to write for the different instruments. She traced it back, and she saw that edition after edition after edition, nobody changed any information about what the euphonium could do. So at all of these advancements in technology and stuff, they were still saying stuff about euphonium that they were saying in the late 1800s.
Wow.
Which was basically like it's an octave higher than a tuba. It can follow the tuba around. But if you want to hear what a euphonium can do, listen to a brass band, listen to some soloists, and hear how euphonium can really, run circles around some of these parts that they're given in wind ensemble or orchestra parts. So I think it's important that euphonium players can listen to other euphonium players' soloistic playing and hear what we're capable of, because a lot of the times in some of the band music, they're given half notes and whole notes to be an octave higher than tubas, but they can really handle some great stuff, as seen in some of these trio sections and marches and some great literature out there. So don't limit them to those half notes and whole notes, and give them an opportunity to shine.
Yeah, that's really interesting you say that, because that's sort of when I think of the euphonium, I think of its ability to play a lot of notes and all these big flowing melody lines and everything. And that's what I think makes it such an interesting spot in the ensemble for it to be able to do that. And I do think that when composers at a certain point did figure that out and started to realize, oh, wow, yes, euphoniums can do a lot more than perhaps we were giving them credit for. But I'm glad that you mentioned that. It's a good thing to know. And perhaps even for, a lot of people will say, hey, listen, make changes to the music for your students if you need to. It might be that you have a real ringer of a student down there that can handle more. Let's give them some more things to do, perhaps, as we're working on the music.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I love that point. That's a good one. What else would you like to share?
This is fun. So another thing I'd like to share is in your programs, I have a proposal to make, but I'd like to propose an idea. We have students starting on trumpet and moving down to euphonium, or we have students starting on trombone and moving over to euphonium. One thing that I've seen done quite successfully, usually in Europe, usually maybe in the UK, I've seen it done a lot, is, how I said that baritone isn't used as much? There's a really great place where we can use it, and that is in beginner band. Because if you have the opportunity, I know money is tight, I know band directors, I know, but if you have that grant, or you have an opportunity with some funding to purchase some new instruments, think about the baritone is about 5-6 pounds. It's not very heavy. It has a smaller bell, which means it has a smaller case. They can fit on a bus. A little kid can carry it, and a little kid can fill the baritone. Can fill it with air. That you need more air for a euphonium because it's bigger. So we have an instrument here that's the same range as trombone and euphonium, that's smaller, that's lighter, and can fit smaller kids. And I think that it's a great option for your 5th grade bands, for your low brass players. I told you that that's my kid's baritone. My kid's in 2nd grade, and he's playing baritone here and there. We're not doing anything formal, but he can pick up the baritone, and he can play. He plays Seven Nation Army. But he's in second grade and he can handle picking up a baritone, putting the mouthpiece in, holding it on his lap. He can handle all of that and fill out the instrument just fine. Now, if I gave him my euphonium, there's not a chance. He can't even pick it up.
But you're right about that, because a lot of times it seems like euphonium players are trumpet players that didn't do well, and they realize, okay, they would do better with a larger mouthpiece. Let's move them down. It's an easy transition. This is why we also have treble clef and bass clef parts, right?
Well, partially, yeah. I mean, part of it is the tradition of the brass band mingling with that as well, because brass band is all in treble clef. So in the U.S., it is mostly why we always have the treble clef and the bass clef. But another part of that is that a whole section of the world is going to be accustomed to euphonium reading off of treble clef.
Right. But to your point, though, it's really wonderful to maybe think about starting more students on a baritone as sort of like a smaller sized euphonium, rather than waiting and seeing who can I move there.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
and here's an extension of that. We want our kids to listen to professional players on their instrument, right? We give a kid a trumpet and we say, listen to Wynton Marsalis. We want them to have that model to listen to and to kind of aspire to be, right? So a lot of kids will when they switch to euphonium, they'll be given one of those American baritones, right? So before, I briefly mentioned that there is no professional model like that. The last professional models of like an American baritone setup were made in the 1950s. So they don't really exist. So what we can do is, if we start kids on the baritone and then when they're ready, move them to euphonium, we can skip over this awkward like instrument that usually maybe middle schoolers have that are these American baritones. Because what can happen when kids are on this instrument is they want to listen to, Gail Robertson or Stephen Meade, and they listen and they're listening to a euphonium player, right? But they're on American baritone. No matter how hard that kid works, they can't make the sound of euphonium. So they say, okay, I'm going to listen to baritone players. I'm going to listen to Katrina Marzella. And they listen to her, but she's on a baritone. So no matter how hard that kid works on an American baritone, they are not going to make the sound of a phenomenal baritone player. They have no professional equivalent to listen to try to emulate that sound. So if we can eliminate the American baritone, and when we have the budget to purchase new instruments, get the baritones, the true baritone to start the kid on, and then when they size up to be the right, when they're grown up enough, switch them directly to that euphonium, so that they can always have something that they can have a professional model for.
I like that advice a lot. It makes a lot of sense. I like the idea of starting the student on the smaller instrument and then letting them sort of graduate to the euphonium. And you're right. I think it would be very difficult to try to emulate a sound if you're not on an instrument that's going to allow you to do that. That does seem like a little bit of a catch-22 for those students, for sure.
Yeah, I remember playing on one of those instruments, and I listened to Brian Bowman, and I was like, wow, he sounds amazing. And I'd play, what he was playing, and I'm like, I clearly didn't sound like him for other reasons, but I couldn't make that timbre. I couldn't make that sound.
Sure.
It was a frustration to me. So I think that there might be kids out there who listen to the Benta Illivolds out there, and they want to sound like them. And they're like, I can't make this sound at all.
Yeah. Well, Amy, and this is this is exactly the kind of thing I was hoping you would say, because it's very specific to the euphonium. Is there any other instrument where you can't really hear a professional play it and know that that's what you're doing? So I think I'm really glad that you made that distinction and sort of pointed that out, because I think we need to let your students know, okay, now you're actually not on a euphonium, so I think that's good information. And let's get them on euphoniums, right? Let's make sure we have those instruments for our high school kids. So all that makes great sense. I love that. Okay, good. Well, where next? Where are you going to go? This? I'm loving where you're going with all this.
Okay. The next thing on my list of what What euphonium players want you to know. It sounds like some sort of clickbait article. 10 things that euphonium players want you to know. So the next thing that's on the list is something that euphonium players actually were very divided about. So it's not going to be advice from me to you on what to do. It's going to be advice to listen to your student on what's right for them. And that is doubling. So low brass players frequently double. And so I had euphonium players say to me, both, don't force your euphonium players to double. And people said, absolutely, require your euphonium players to double. So what do we make of that? So I think what we make of that is listen to your students. If you have a student who loves euphonium and what they want to do is play euphonium, then let them just play euphonium. If you have a kid who is showing interest towards doubling, bring up doubling with them.
If you could, let's make sure we understand the terms. When you say doubling, are you talking about learning a second instrument?
Yes, I'm talking about trombone, tuba,
right.
And the reason is that we have this outdated notion that you have to do certain things to be able to become a professional musician. So people are coming at this through a place of love. Like if you are going to take this to its logical conclusion and you want to push students to be their best and be the most marketable in their future, they say that they want euphonium players to double so that they can play in jazz bands, so that they can play in orchestra beyond the 8 or so pieces that euphonium typically plays in orchestra. And they're coming from a place of love and encouragement in saying, get your euphonium players on trombone, get them on tuba so that they can play in any ensemble they want. But the other side is these people saying, don't force your students to take on more than they want. Don't look at a kid who likes playing euphonium and think that every kid has to make themselves marketable as a potential professional musician.
Wow, this is really interesting. And I think it depends on perhaps it depends on who you're talking to. Because if I am going into college and a performance degree, then maybe having other skills, I don't know, helps me get more work. But if we're talking about a kid sitting in a high school band who loves his euphonium, right? I think your point, it might be, why not let them play euphonium?
Absolutely. And so people were very divided on this. Some people were saying, I wish my band director forced me to double because now I don't have as much experience on the other low brass instruments. And now that I'm a professional, I'm not getting as many gigs as I would like. But then the other people are saying, you know, we're not preparing all of our kids to become a professional musician. We're trying to instill a lifelong love of music, and forcing kids to play the instrument that they didn't choose initially could drive them away. So
it seems to me this is very situational for a band director to sort of figure out, where is this kid? Who is this kid standing in front of me? What are their goals? Why are they in band? And why are they playing this horn? Like, I think that perhaps is part of this, is like, you need to know your students and talk to them and think about it, right? Because you're right. Why should I force you to learn trombone if you don't want to play trombone? Mm-hmm. And what the hell? It's high school band. Play euphonium and jazz band. Like, who cares?
Exactly. That's my philosophy, right? Yeah. Absolutely. And if a kid wants to play, you know, the trombone part on a euphonium in orchestra or something, you know what I did in orchestra? I played the French horn part. Because I had a euphonium that had a cover on my fourth valve. You put, band directors, if you don't know this and you have a small program, if you put that fourth valve down, your instrument's now in F. So if you're missing some horn players and you really need someone to fill out that part, you know, grab your euphonium player, stick that fourth valve down, you're good to go. So I played the horn part in orchestra.
Okay, so wait a minute. Now I feel like I'm a brass player. I should know this, but okay, so I'm putting down my fourth valve. it makes the horn in F. Do I need to transpose the part now? Or am I reading the French horn part, or am I playing my notes on euphonium and it sounds there?
You're playing, you're just playing the horn part.
Just play the horn part.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a great tip, because most people really need extra help with horn parts a lot of times.
And that's why I played the horn part in my orchestra sometimes when we needed some extra help.
That's a good tip, everybody. All right. I love that. See, Amy, you're hitting home runs here. I'm loving all these tips. This is good. Okay. So good. Where next? These are all very interesting. What else do you have?
Okay. Let's see here. Oh, if you want to challenge your euphonium players, see if you can find a brass band in your area. I know I'm biased here, but this was from, the list that the euphonium players gave me. I just brought up the list on the other part of my screen so I could remember, because I couldn't remember the remaining ones, but they're back now. I remember them now. So, because in the euphonium in the brass band, is kind of like the solo cello. So the euphonium is the head of the low brass, and the solo cornet is the head of the high brass. And so in that role, euphonium players get very technical solos. They are a leader, and frequently are playing in octaves with the solo cornet. So if you have a euphonium student who isn't being challenged, look up, see if you can find a brass band in the area. Youth brass bands are popping up everywhere. They're extremely popular. I've helped, I think, 5 youth brass bands get started up in the past 2 years. And adult brass bands are popping up everywhere as well. So get them involved in a brass band, because that's where they're going to be truly challenged to become leaders.
Okay, I love that. That's a great point, and another great performance opportunity for those students where they didn't have to go double on something else. So I love that. Good.
Right.
All right. Good. All right. I'm loving this. What's next on the list?
Okay, on the list, the euphonium really does go on the left leg. Euphonium players all over the place. I see it so frequently. The euphonium players have their euphonium resting on their right leg. So the mouthpiece is to the left of the instrument. So if you can kind of picture this, with the mouthpiece to the left of the instrument when you're holding it, if the euphonium is on your right leg, the entirety of this weight is shifted over to your right side, which means that your spine is curving a little bit to reach that mouthpiece, and you have weight pulling you off to the side, which can pull muscles, which can hurt a kid's back. And we know that the shorter a person is, the more likely they are to have back pain from these low brass instruments forcing them to twist their torso. So we want to make sure that these kids with these bigger instruments are not moving their body to the instrument. So what we want to do is essentially put it on the inside of that left leg, and the taller students are going to have to sit up. So the kids are not going to like this. When you tell them this, they will not be happy. A lot of kids, especially high schooler guys, will have to lift the euphonium up off their lap. And it's going to sit kind of in the inside of that left leg. That way, the mouthpiece is in the middle, and the vision is, their field of vision is opened a lot more, and they're sitting with their torso and their trunk just completely in line, so that we don't promote any pulled muscles, any playing injuries.
Okay, I'm really glad that you made this point, because I feel like sort of the ergonomics of instruments is something that people talk a lot about when I'm having these conversations. I just had one about saxophone, and we kept talking about how they don't get the strap right, and they're all leaning down, they're trying to get to the horn rather than bringing the horn to them. Sort of the same thing here, right? Let's set ourselves up for healthy muscle and body postures,
Yes.
and bring the horn to me rather than me trying to slump down to it.
Absolutely. And if you have those taller students in high school in particular, then and they're because now they have to pick up their euphonium when they're playing off their lap. There are tons of things that you can do to make that more comfortable for them. Some people will use a cushion, like a black little pillow. I don't tend to use pillows because they kind of, once you scrunch them down, like what support do they give? But the two things that I really like are using a folded hand towel. You can get a black hand towel or a blue one if the kid's going to be wearing jeans or something that'll blend in. But you fold it to how much thickness you need to kind of boost that euphonium up. The other one that I've only seen a few times that I think is a really cool idea is you can get a yoga block and then you can shave it down so that the part of the yoga block fits your leg and the top of the yoga block has that little dip for the euphonium, and then it is exactly the height that you need it, and it will stay that exact height, indefinitely.
Wow, those are good tips. So sometimes rather than having to hold the horn up, you have some support underneath to put it at the right level. But this is really worth the trouble because you don't want anybody slumping over, twisting. All of that's bad. You want to be as comfortable and like physically correct as you can be so that you can play with the most comfort, breathe correctly, all that stuff. So that's a good point.
And then I use when I'm standing and playing. First off, kids standing and playing euphonium, they frequently do not have the muscle tone to be able to stand and play with a 10, 11 pound instrument out in front of them. I really think that euphonium is like the least ergonomic instrument that I've come across. I can stand and play trombone for however long. It doesn't bother me one bit. But tuba and euphonium are just incredibly awkward to stand and play. It's really, so when I stand and I play, I use something called an ergo brass, ERGO. So I'm going to reach for my euphonium, and I'll show you part of the system. So on here, I have this bar, and the bar goes across the inside of the euphonium, and it has 4 little circles. And you see it's attached by zip ties so that when I clean it, I can just take it off. It has some squishy stuff there to protect the euphonium. And so then I have a stick. It's a metal stick with like a ball on the end. And that goes through one of these holes. And then the other end of this stick is attached to a belt. And the belt has a little pouch. So basically the stick is holding up the euphonium and it's going into the pouch on my belt. And I spray painted the belt black. So when I'm in my concert black, no one can see it. And that transfers all the weight from my arms into my legs, which are much stronger.
So this is a belt going around your waist. It's not like a bassoon strap that's holding the instrument. This is around your waist.
There are other options. There is a strap, like a bassoon strap. I don't necessarily like it because the euphonium doesn't go straight up and down when you're holding it. It tends to get pulled down in weird ways. But another option for some help, if a student, I'm 5 feet tall, so I don't think that I'm ever going to be super comfortable standing. And I also have hips, and they never really anticipated that. So I'm, I can't pull the instrument into my body how they intended. So I'm probably always going to use my ergo brass. But for other students, there's a euphonium strap that you fix onto the euphonium near the 4th valve. And so we have 3 valves on top usually and 1 on the side. For kind of advanced student models and up, it's usually 3 on the top and 1 on the side. And so what this strap does is it goes around the bulk of your left hand. So you're putting the weight onto your left hand, because frequently we end up with our weight on the inside of our right thumb and like the last 2 fingers on our left hand. It's 11 pounds and we have all this weight on 2 fingers and a thumb. And it can hurt, So this transfers it onto the whole hand.
Yeah.
Gives a little bit more security.
So why does the euphonium player need to stand? Like, are there a lot of times when this happens? Like, I would think just, carry a couple chairs for the tuba and euphonium, let them sit. Like, how often does this actually happen?
Oh, I that's a thing, because I'm like, I really don't think that euphonium players or tuba players need to stand. And tuba players usually get out of having to stand. But I'll do shows where they're doing some staging or something, and they want euphonium players to stand for like entertainment value, to go up and play a solo or something. And I'm like, why?
Wow. Okay. It doesn't really lend itself to this, although, as you said, there are many solutions that are out there that can help someone who is going to be in that position. But as a music educator, that strikes me as being a lot of to do for nothing, really.
Yes.
So
yes, absolutely. But I've had students come to me who have said that their previous teacher said, that if they're playing a solo, it's rude to sit down. And I was like, no, it's not. It's
I wouldn't say that to a cello player, but anyway.
Perfectly understandable.
Okay. This is really fun. Okay, so anything else? So is there anything else on the list you want to mention before we wrap this up?
Yeah, so euphonium does go on the left leg. I said be sensitive on the doubling issue. If you have a student who is starting to get really pretty advanced on their instrument, I would recommend that you start bringing up the idea of their other clef. So if they switch down from trumpet and they're playing on treble clef, if that student is really kind of shining through and playing advanced stuff, bring up learning bass clef. Or if they learned on bass clef and they don't know how to play treble clef, bring that up, because that's going to open up a whole world of opportunities that they didn't previously have. That's going to open up different solos, borrowing solos from different repertoire, and playing with different ensembles that might be, playing different clefs. Orchestra, the pieces that are in orchestra some of them are in bass clef, some of them are in treble clef.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. Like, making yourself versatile and able to do lots of stuff. If I'm really serious about my euphonium, that does seem like a worthwhile skill, for sure.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Yeah, so I start bringing that up. I mean, it's different for every kid. As an educator, you kind of have to see if the kid is ready for it. But sometime midway through high school, they absolutely can handle learning some of the other clefs, that they can open that door to more repertoire.
This has been such an interesting conversation, like so many helpful tips that I've learned a lot today, and I thought I knew a whole lot about euphonium. So I think this has been really, really interesting, and you've explained it all very clearly, very thoroughly. So is anything else that you wanted to say, tips, before I ask you my final question? Are you ready for it?
Oh no, what is the final question?
Here's your final. No, it's really just fun. So I've been asking this at the end of all of these conversations, Amy, and I'd love to ask it of you. Why do you love the euphonium? Why do you love playing?
I love that question. So I was one of those trumpet players that you mentioned earlier on. I think I was second or third chair, and I did what the band director tends to do. They pick their second or third chair and they bump them down to euphonium and tuba. So I got bumped down to euphonium. And my band director gave me one of those American baritones that probably was from the 1950s. It was awful. It had a case that was like splintering and would put splinters in my leg, and it looked like so beat up. And after a while, I went in. This isn't why I love euphonium necessarily. This is just the background. But like I went in I went into my band director's office to quit because I was like, this instrument, I can't make it do what I want it to do. It was out of tune. I mean, I didn't really know at the time, but it didn't sound right to me. And it was out of tune. I just didn't have the tools to say that yet. But, and my band director had just gotten a brand new shiny silver euphonium. And he was like, well, then I guess I'm going to have to find somebody else to play this. And I was like, oh, I guess I can stay with this a little bit longer. So here I am, however many years later, still playing the euphonium. I like the tone of a euphonium. I like how I can fill. I say that I fill the room with a hug. Because I think tuba and euphonium, because our bells go up. It kind of, our sound goes up and then just descends on everyone into this like pool of low brass sound. And I love how that feels, as a musician, as a performer, to brass instruments are loud. So we have this combination of loudness, but it manifests in this kind of, all-encompassing like hug, as I said before, as opposed to when I'm on trombone, I feel like it's kind of like the sound is just shooting out at someone and you're like, well, I'm sorry if you're in the way. But when I'm on euphonium, the sound descends on people, and so it always seems much more all-encompassing, maybe. I love that I can play and solo in front of an ensemble and have that presence. People don't frequently have to be told, be quiet, the euphonium is playing. I can pump it out because it has those qualities of low brass. And I think as a girl, I also thought that it was cool, people's reaction, because it is loud and it is big. And people would be like, oh, look at this little 5 foot tall, like 100-pound girl. And then I'd be like, bam.
That's really cool. I love that. That's really fun. And I have to tell you, the way you described the sound of the euphonium is exactly why I love the sound of the euphonium. I do think the hug is a lovely way of saying that. And it does, of course, as a French horn player, I love those sort of dark, mellow, rich, feel like you're dipped in chocolate kind of sounds anyway, right? So
and horn can do that too. Absolutely.
So I feel like it's sort of simpatico with the French horn, and maybe that's why I have a thing for the baritones and the euphoniums especially. Mm-hmm. But thank you for answering that way. I love that. Amy Bliss, you are absolutely wonderful. This was really, really interesting information. By the way, everybody, Amy has a very cool book called Amy's Brass Band that you can get on Amazon. Amy, I love that you have even used your expertise and your love of low brass instruments and brass instruments in general to create that book, right? Everybody can get that on Amazon. Am I right?
Yeah, it's available worldwide through Amazon. And if there are any local people to the Columbus area, just reach out and I'll sign a copy for you.
How cool is that? So Amy Bliss, thank you so much for talking to me. You did a wonderful, wonderful job.
Oh, thank you. It's nice to meet you.
Make sure you watch for all the releases in this series, and we hope you'll subscribe here at YouTube so that you don't miss a single release. Thank you for watching.
Marching Arts Education is the home of the Marching Roundtable podcast. We give you access to the top marching arts professionals through live webinars, podcasts, videos, interviews, and online coursework. With over 1,000 podcasts and hundreds of webinars and videos, there are hours of great professional development for you and your staff. Sign up for a membership to Marching Arts Education to get complete access to all webinars, videos, and podcasts, plus discounts on coursework. Many directors are using professional development funds through their school or boosters to make these resources available to their staff. Imagine what you could do with so many great new ideas from the top professionals in our activity. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and sign up for our newsletter to find out about the latest podcasts, webinars, and new content. Find all of this and sign up at marchingartseducation.com.